Moonlight sifted through the thick canopy, painting the forest floor with silver shards. Every step she took sank into the damp earth, her bare feet leaving fleeting impressions that would soon be swallowed by shadows. The girl ran, not from the night, but from a world that had turned cruel. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the rustling leaves, each whisper seeming almost alive, carrying voices that weren't there. She paused, chest heaving, ears straining. Somewhere in the darkness a branch cracked. A fox darted across her path, eyes glinting, and for a fleeting moment it felt like the forest itself was watching her, urging her onward. Her life had become a maze of hidden clearings and secret streams, her days marked only by survival and the careful avoidance of human eyes. Long ago, her village had branded her different, a danger, a secret. The fire that drove her away still haunted her dreams, laughter turned to screams, betrayal disguised as advice, and a warning whispered by her mother, now lost, "One day he will find you." The thought sent a shiver down her spine, both fear and a spark of something she couldn't name. The moon's glow touched a silver pendant she clutched tightly to her chest, a talisman no one had ever understood. It hummed faintly, as if aware of the unseen force stirring in the night. A presence lingered nearby, unseen yet undeniable. The forest's whispers were no longer random. They formed a pattern, a song of destiny. Somewhere out there, waiting beyond the thicket and shadow, was a pair of eyes that belonged to the one who could change everything, the Alpha. And tonight the forest was alive with his scent. She inhaled sharply, hiding behind a moss-covered boulder, muscles coiled like springs. Her instinct screamed both caution and something deeper, something thrilling. And though she didn't yet know it, the forest itself had conspired for this meeting, the prelude to a story written long before she had taken her first step into exile. The wind stirred, carrying a name, almost like a promise. She is mine. Years in the woods had shaped her, molded her into a creature of quiet strength. The girl, now a young woman, moved with grace that belied the harshness of her upbringing. Each morning, she traced the river's edge, hunting, foraging, marking the territory she had claimed as her own. Survival had been brutal, but it had taught her the only lesson that mattered: trust no one completely. The memory of her exile was a scar she carried in her chest. The village that once held her laughed behind her back, whispered her secrets, and banished her from warmth and community. She had begged for mercy once, her voice trembling, eyes full of hope, and had been met with scorn. That day, pride had been born from ashes. Even in the quiet of the woods, betrayal haunted her. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl, reminded her of human frailty. And yet the solitude had its gifts. The trees became confidants, the streams carried her reflections, the wind whispered truths no one dared speak. She had become a hunter not only of food, but of shadows, learning to read the world without being seen, moving through life unnoticed, untouchable. Yet tonight, under the silver glow of a gibbous moon, a chill pressed against her senses unlike any she had felt. Something was near, a disturbance in the patterns of the forest. Her pulse quickened. She crouched behind an ancient oak, scanning the underbrush, muscles taut, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. For the first time in years, a spark of unease mingled with anticipation. Her exile had been survival, but now she wondered if fate had finally decided to end her solitude, or if the danger she sensed was something far greater. And somewhere, beyond the rustling leaves and shadows, eyes watched her with a predatory focus that made her pulse stutter. The Alpha was coming. Her chest tightened, and though fear whispered its usual warnings, a part of her could not deny the flutter of something unexpected, something dangerously intoxicating, at the thought of being found. The forest held its breath as she moved through the underbrush, each step careful, deliberate. Her mind wandered to memories she had tried so hard to bury, faces twisted in anger, fingers pointing, voices that had once meant safety now hissing betrayal. The village that had rejected her now existed only in whispers of shame, yet their echoes still haunted her, like shadows that stretched longer at dusk. A rustle of leaves drew her attention. She froze, nostrils flaring as she sensed the presence of something, or someone different. Wolves, humans, or perhaps the distant scent of a wandering pack, stirring curiosity and unease alike. The stories had reached even this hidden sanctuary. The Alpha was searching, moving through the territories, claiming his lost mate. And though she had buried the thought deep inside, her pulse betrayed her. Memories returned unbidden. The night her life had fractured, a festival of fire and laughter, a betrayal by those she had trusted most. She had run heart-screaming, feet cutting through the darkness. The sky had been a blanket of stars, and yet not one of them had offered comfort. Her mother's last words burned bright in her mind. You are not meant for their world. Hide and survive. One day destiny will find you. Now, years later, that destiny seemed closer than ever. She pressed her hand to the talisman she always wore, feeling its warmth beneath her palm. It thrummed faintly, as if alive, reacting to the nearness of what she could not yet see, but could already feel. A low growl echoed through the trees, followed by silence. Her heart stuttered. Something, or someone, was watching. She crouched behind a fallen log, eyes scanning the shadows. In the distance, movement, tall, controlled, and impossibly commanding. The Alpha, she could sense him before she saw him, an aura of power, patience, and danger that made her pulse quicken despite herself. She ducked lower, instincts warring with curiosity. Every fiber of her being screamed to flee, yet a part of her, a reckless, dangerous part, wanted to stay to see him, to understand why her soul trembled at the mere thought of him. The night pressed close, and as the moonlight broke through the canopy, she caught the faintest glimpse of him. Still, wetted against the silver glow, watching, patient, calculating. For the first time in years, she felt both hunted and desired. And though she would not admit it, not even to herself, the thought sent an exhilarating shiver down her spine. The forest whispered around her, but she no longer felt alone. Shadows of the past loomed, but a new presence stirred. A promise, a danger, a fire she had not yet dared to touch. Her pulse raced. Tonight, the hunt was no longer hers alone. Cliffhanger, something in the shadows shifted. A familiar scent, a presence that moved closer. She held her breath, knowing she could no longer hide. Dawn crept through the trees, painting the forest in muted golds and silvers. She moved like a shadow among shadows, silent, deliberate, every step honed by years of solitary survival. Her bow was an extension of herself, drawn and ready, eyes scanning the undergrowth for movement. To the untrained eye, she was just another creature of the woods. But every animal here knew differently. They sensed her power, subtle and untamed, a force even she barely understood. The scent of deer drifted on the morning air, and she stalked it with precision, muscles coiled, breath steady. Survival was instinct, but instinct alone could not explain the quiet thrill she felt as she hunted. The forest had been her companion, her tutor, and her cage. She had learned its languages, the snap of twigs, the whisper of wind, the subtle shift in shadows that signaled prey or danger. A memory flickered, sharp as the arrow she nocked. The night she fled her village, flames and fear had driven her into the woods, leaving behind a world she had once thought home. Betrayal had carved deep lines into her heart, and solitude had been her only cure. No one had understood her, no one had tried, until now. Though she didn't know it yet, the Alpha was out there, watching, waiting, and unknowingly pulling her fate toward him. A rustle, closer this time, broke her focus. She spun, bow raised, eyes narrowing. A pair of golden orbs reflected the sunlight filtering through the trees. A wolf, huge, sleek, and unnervingly aware of her presence, stepped into view. Heart racing, she tensed, but the wolf did not attack. Instead, it circled, sniffing, then padded away, leaving a trail of uneasy awareness in its wake. Something in the woods had shifted. The forest seemed more alert, more alive, as if it had recognized her potential, the hidden strength she had yet to fully wield. She had always relied on skill, speed, and instinct, but lately, subtle flashes of power had emerged. A deer had frozen mid, leap once, paralyzed by fear before she even released her arrow. A river's current had shifted in a way that seemed unnatural, guiding her to safety. She hadn't understood it then, but the signs were undeniable, and now she sensed it again. A presence lingering at the edges of her awareness, heavy with power, patient, and impossibly close. The Alpha. The very thought made her pulse quicken. anger and desire mingling in a cocktail of fear and fascination. She had survived for years alone, and yet the idea of him finding her stirred a reckless hope she didn't dare name. For a moment, she lowered her bow, closing her eyes. The forest exhaled around her, leaves trembling, birds silent, shadows long. She had learned to trust nothing, but perhaps, just perhaps, she was about to learn the truth of destiny. Her ears twitched. From somewhere deep in the trees, a low growl rumbled, not threatening but deliberate, measured, and her heart skipped. She knew then that the hunt was no longer about survival. It had become about something far more dangerous, connection. Cliffhanger, she turned, bow raised, muscles taut. But the forest offered no answer, only silence. Then a shadow moved sleek and deliberate between the trees. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she crouched behind a thick tangle of ferns, muscles coiled, every sense on high alert. The shadow that had slipped between the trees earlier lingered in her mind. She knew it wasn't just any predator. It was something different, something commanding, aware, and impossibly patient. A rustle, subtle but deliberate, caught her attention. She froze, ears straining. Then she saw him, the alpha, not fully, not yet, but enough. A flash of dark hair, the glint of amber eyes catching the sun through the leaves. He moved with effortless power, silent, precise, each step measured, each movement deliberate. Even from a distance, his presence pressed against her, an invisible force that made her pulse spike and her breath hitch. Her instinct screamed to run, yet part of her, the reckless, foolish part she had tried to bury years ago, wanted to stay, to watch, to understand. Every nerve in her body thrummed with awareness. She had survived years alone, but this was different. This presence stirred something deep inside, something she hadn't felt since she was a child. The alpha paused, head tilting slightly as if sensing her. Her heart lurched. Could he see her? Could he know she was here, hidden, vulnerable, unclaimed? The stories she had heard, the warnings whispered in shadowed corners, now took shape in the man before her. Every tale of destiny, every hint of a bond she had thought impossible, now carried weight. She ducked lower, pressing herself against the forest floor, refusing to be seen, but her curiosity burned. She watched as he moved through the trees, a silent predator, his senses tuned to a world she had only glimpsed from afar. There was a power in him that both terrified and enthralled her. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tell herself it was only instinct, only survival, but she knew better. The alpha stopped, eyes sweeping the forest, and for a heartbeat, their gazes met. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement neither could define. It was raw, immediate, and dangerous. Her breath caught. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, the rustle of leaves whispering secrets, urging caution, yet promising revelation. A sudden movement startled her, a branch snapping beneath his foot, and he was gone in an instant, like a shadow dissolving into the undergrowth. But the mark he had left on her senses, on her heartbeat, lingered. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling it pound with an unfamiliar rhythm, as though the forest, the moon, and the alpha himself were conspiring to draw her out. Cliffhanger, her pulse racing, she whispered into the silence, almost to herself, "Who are you?" The forest answered only with rustling leaves, but she knew he was close, and he would find her. Night had fallen, draping the forest in silver and shadow. She moved silently through the undergrowth, her bare feet pressing against soft moss, listening to the whispers of the wind. The moon hung low and full, spilling pale light that danced on the treetops, illuminating paths she had walked countless times yet never felt fully owned. Her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic in the roots of an ancient oak. She knelt, clearing away the leaves, and her breath caught. A talisman lay before her, delicate, yet imbued with an energy that hummed beneath her touch. Her pulse quickened. She had never seen it before, yet a strange familiarity pulled at her. Symbols etched into its surface seemed alive, twisting in the moonlight, whispering secrets she almost dared not hear. "The Alpha," she whispered, pressing the talisman to her chest. She could feel a strange resonance, a bond that tugged at her very soul. Memories of the fleeting glimpse from earlier that day surged back, the amber eyes, the effortless power, the sense that he had seen her, really seen her. And now, this talisman, this gift of fate, confirmed what she had only felt in whispers of instinct. Their connection was real, predestined, but with that revelation came fear. To be found was to be vulnerable. She had survived for years hidden from the world, unclaimed, untouchable, and yet her body responded to the idea of the alpha dangerous, magnetic, inevitable. She pressed the talisman tighter, as if it could shield her from the truth she was both terrified and longing to accept. A crackling in the underbrush snapped her attention to the present. Her senses sharpened. The forest was alive tonight, not with her alone. A scent, familiar and intoxicating, slipped into her awareness. He was close, closer than before. Her heart thundered in her chest, every instinct warning her, every nerve on edge. From the shadows, the alpha emerged, his movements silent, deliberate, his eyes fixed on her as though he had been tracking not just her scent, but her heartbeat. "You hide well," he murmured, voice low, commanding, yet laced with something she could not name. Her lips parted, but no words came. She only stared, pulse wild, muscles coiled. His gaze swept over her, lingering on the talisman, then returning to her eyes with an intensity that made her shiver. "Do you know what this means?" he asked, gesturing slightly toward the pendant. She swallowed, unsure how much to reveal, how much to admit even to herself. I think it belongs to me," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "I've never known why." He stepped closer, the distance between them charged, electric. "It belongs to both of us," he said, his voice a low rumble, "and you cannot run from what is yours, not now, not ever." The words struck her like fire. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to pretend the forest's shadows could shield her forever. But deep in her bones, she knew he was right. She was marked, claimed, even if she had yet to accept it. Cliffhanger, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of danger, and she realized with a jolt that he was not the only one searching the forest tonight. Someone, or something, was coming. The forest seemed to hold its breath beneath the full moon, silver light spilling across her shoulders, and the worn path she had claimed as her own. Her heart still raced from the encounter with the alpha, the resonance of the talisman burning against her chest. Every instinct screamed both caution and an unspoken desire she could no longer deny. She hadn't expected what happened next. In the stillness, as she moved to check the perimeter, a sudden surge of energy coursed through her veins. Her skin tingled, hair standing on end, and a mark appeared across her wrist intricate, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She gasped, staring at it in disbelief. The lines traced themselves into a pattern that felt alive, pulsing with heat and warning. Only a mate could trigger such a reaction. Only an alpha could awaken this. From the shadows, a soft sound made her freeze. Footsteps careful, deliberate. He emerged, moving like a predator, and yet something softer lingered in his gaze. The alpha's amber eyes widened slightly as he took in the mark. "It's you," he breathed, voice low, reverent, and unyielding. "I've found you at last." She instinctively recoiled, heart hammering. "You shouldn't be here. You can't." Her words faltered, disbelief mingling with a fierce thread of hope she barely allowed herself to feel. He stepped closer, the warmth of his presence a contradiction to the danger it carried. "I don't need to find you," he said, each word deliberate, a whisper against the night. "You are mine, the bond. It's here, it cannot be denied." Her pulse quickened, the mark burned hotter under his gaze, thrumming in resonance with his presence. She tried to resist, to run, to remind herself that survival had always depended on isolation. But the pull was irresistible. Every fiber of her being ached with recognition, a longing she could not name, could not rationalize. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured, stepping closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. The pull, the connection, the bond that was meant to be. Her breath caught, lips parted, a mixture of fear and something far more dangerous washing over her. She had survived years alone, hidden in the shadows, untouchable. But here, under the silver gaze of the moon and the intensity of the alpha, she realized survival was no longer enough. She had been found. And the bond between them was unbreakable, undeniable. A sudden rustle in the distance reminded her that the forest was never quiet for long. But this time, she didn't move to hide. Instead, she lifted her gaze to his, and for the first time in years, she felt a thrill of inevitability, and a spark of hope that had been buried in exile. Cliffhanger, his hand hovered near hers, and as their fingers brushed, the mark flared brighter, illuminating the forest, and drawing attention from more than just the alpha. Danger lurked closer than she realized. The first light of dawn painted the forest in pale gold, but the peace it brought was an illusion. Birds chirped nervously, and even the wind seemed to hesitate, carrying an unease she couldn't ignore. She had grown accustomed to the forest's rhythms, the quiet patterns of survival, but today something felt wrong. A sudden rustle, sharper than the usual whisper of leaves, set her muscles taut. She darted behind a tree, eyes scanning the shadows. Their figures moving swiftly between the trunks. Wolves, no, not wolves, humans or something in between. Rivals, the scent was unmistakable. A pack seeking to claim what was not theirs, drawn by the mark she had feared revealing, now glowing faintly under the morning sun. Her heart raced, she reached for her bow, fingers trembling with adrenaline. The alpha had left only hours before, trusting her to stay hidden, but now every instinct screamed danger. The forest that had been her sanctuary was suddenly a maze of threats, of eyes and teeth and claws that wanted what she barely understood herself. She moved silently, weaving between trunks, keeping low. The talisman throbbed against her chest as though sensing the approaching danger. Her breath came shallow, rapid. She had survived alone for years, but survival alone did not prepare her for betrayal. Not this close, not from those she had once considered allies. And then it happened. A familiar scent hit her. A wolf she had once trusted, part of her hidden pack, now standing with the intruders. Her stomach twisted in shock and fury. Why, she hissed under her breath, voice trembling with disbelief. After everything, why had the figure stepped forward, eyes cold and unyielding? You were a mistake. The wolf growled, a danger to the forest and to all of us. The alpha will come for you, yes, but he will not save you from what we must do. Rage and fear collided inside her, coiling her muscles, sharpening her instincts. She released an arrow, striking near the betrayer to warn, not kill, though the thought flitted dangerously close. Her survival skills, honed over years, kicked in. Every movement was precise, fluid, a dance of shadow and reflex. From the tree line, a low, commanding growl rumbled, a warning. The alpha had returned, sensing the shift in the forest, drawn by the danger she could not yet escape. His presence was immediate, protective, overwhelming. Step back, he called, voice low, lethal, yet threaded with concern. The betrayer faltered, eyes widening at the sight of the alpha. For the first time, she felt a sliver of hope, knowing she was not entirely alone. Yet the forest still held its dangers, and the betrayal had left wounds deeper than claws could inflict. Trust had been broken, and nothing could undo the sting of a pack member turned traitor. Cliffhanger, as the sun broke over the horizon, the rival pack advanced again, and the alpha's eyes met hers. Silent but deadly, he whispered, "Hold on, this isn't over." And she knew, deep in her chest, that the real battle had only just begun. The forest hummed with tension, every rustle of leaves echoing the unspoken threat that lingered in the air. She stood on a ridge overlooking the clearing, muscles coiled, heart hammering, yet she could not move. The alpha's presence pressed against her from the shadows below, powerful, controlled, and utterly commanding. Every step he took seemed to bend the very earth beneath him. "You should not be here," he said, voice low, carrying authority and a hint of something more. His ire, frustration, and a protective edge that made her chest tighten. She met his gaze, unwavering, despite the shiver that ran through her at the sound of his words. "And yet, here I am," she replied, voice steady, hiding the pulse of fear that threatened to betray her. Pride was her shield, and she clung to it fiercely. Survival had taught her to rely only on herself, to trust no one, not even him. He stepped closer, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. "You do not understand the bond we share," he said, amber eyes blazing, the mark, the connection. "It is not something that can be ignored." She clenched her fists, gaze flicking to the forest around them. "I understand plenty," she said sharply. "I know enough to survive, and I know enough to know that I am not yours to claim." A faint growl rumbled from his chest, low and warning. His presence seemed to expand, radiating control and dominance, yet threaded with longing. "You cannot run from this," he murmured, "not from me, not from what we were meant to be. You may survive the forest, but you cannot survive the bond." The words stirred something dangerous inside her, a mixture of fear, desire, and defiance. She had spent years alone, untouchable, and now he was here, unraveling the carefully constructed walls she had built. Her pulse raced, every nerve alive with awareness, yet she refused to yield. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the raw intensity of his presence. "Look at me," he demanded softly, the growl fading into something gentler. "See me. Accept what is real. Accept me." Her breath hitched, lips parted, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see not just the alpha, but the man beneath, the protector, the force, the mate she had denied herself even in thought. Yet her pride would not allow surrender so easily. "Cliffhanger," he reached out, hand hovering near hers, and the tension between them snapped like a drawn bowstring. "Enough games," he whispered. "It's time to stop hiding." The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move, and she knew whatever she chose would change everything. The forest seemed to burn with tension as night fell, shadows deepening beneath the silver light of the moon. She moved carefully, senses straining, aware of every rustle, every breath of wind. The recent confrontation with the alpha lingered like fire in her veins, hot, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. He followed, silent, patient, his presence a constant pull she could neither resist nor escape. Every step he took reminded her of the power he carried, the intensity of the bond they shared, and the way he could unsettle her even without touching her. Her heart raced, conflicting emotions twisting in a dizzying spiral of fear, longing, and something far more dangerous, desire. A sudden cry shattered the night, sharp and urgent. A rival pack had encroached once again, testing the forest's boundaries and her limits. Instinct overtook hesitation. She moved quickly, arrows nocked, muscles taut, adrenaline sharpening every reflex. The alpha was at her side in a heartbeat, his hand brushing hers as they fought, a spark of heat igniting where skin barely met. "Careful," he murmured, voice low, eyes blazing with a mixture of warning and something else she couldn't name. She felt it then, the undeniable pull between them, stronger than the forest's dangers, stronger than her will to remain untouchable. They fought in tandem, instinctively attuned to each other's movements. Every clash of claws, every dodge, every leap in the shadows heightened the electricity that crackled between them. Their connection was no longer subtle, it was undeniable, raw, and consuming. Her breath hitched when his hand lingered against hers, and she almost forgot the danger they faced. Almost, after the last of the intruders fell back, retreating into the woods, she sank to the ground, chest heaving, arrow quivering in her grip. The alpha knelt beside her, close enough that his heat brushed her arm. "You are incredible," he said, his voice softer now, yet threaded with intensity, "and you're mine. Do you understand that?" Her pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to deny it, wanted to retreat into the familiar safety of solitude, yet the truth blazed through every fiber of her being. I don't know if I can survive being yours," she admitted, voice trembling, almost a whisper. His eyes softened, yet the intensity never faded. "It isn't a question of survival," he said. "It's a question of fate, and fate brought you to me." He reached out, cupping her face, thumb brushing along her jaw, sending sparks through her body she couldn't ignore. The night wrapped around them, silent and watchful, as the forest seemed to pulse with the same energy that thrummed between them. Desire, fear, and inevitability collided in a dangerous dance, one that neither could deny nor resist. Cliffhanger, the forest shifted again, and a new scent, foreign, threatened, drifted toward them. She leaned back instinctively, but the alpha's hand tightened around hers. "They are coming," he murmured, and in that instant she realized their bond would be tested far sooner than she had imagined. The forest was a blur of silver and shadow as danger pressed in from all sides. She ran, heart hammering, every muscle coiled with urgency, yet something inside her shifted. The alpha was beside her, moving with lethal precision, but even his presence could not shield her from the threat advancing through the underbrush. And then it happened. A surge of energy erupted within her, sudden and wild, igniting a strength she had never known. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, weaving through the attackers with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural. Branches bent beneath her touch, the river's current altered to shield her path, and the forest itself seemed to respond to her will. She gasped, eyes widening at the realization. This was power she had always sensed, but never dared to wield. It pulsed in tandem with the Alpha's presence, as if her bond with him amplified what lay dormant for years. The talisman around her neck flared with silver light, resonating with the energy radiating from her core. The attackers faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks as the forest itself seemed to rise against them. The Alpha's eyes widened, a rare flicker of awe crossing his fierce expression. "You," he began, but stopped, unable to fully articulate what he was witnessing. Her chest heaved, breath ragged, heart racing with the intoxicating mix of fear and exhilaration. She had survived years alone, hidden in the shadows, but now she understood that her exile had been only preparation. The forest had trained her, shaped her, and guided her toward this awakening. He reached for her hand, grounding her in the storm of newfound power. "Your gift," he said softly, voice laced with reverence. "It's incredible, and it's tied to us, tied to this bond." A shiver ran through her at the touch of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, the acknowledgement of what she had always feared. She was no longer just a hidden girl in the woods. She was a force to be reckoned with, and together they were unstoppable. Cliffhanger, as the last of the attackers retreated, a new, darker presence stirred in the forest. She felt it deep within her bones, a shadow looming on the horizon, promising danger that neither skill nor power could easily overcome. The battle was not over. The forest erupted into chaos as dawn barely kissed the treetops. The rival pack had struck with precision and ferocity, their howls carrying like war cries through the dense woods. Every branch, every shadow became a battlefield, and she felt the pulse of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. She moved alongside the Alpha, instincts perfectly synchronized. Every motion, every glance, every subtle gesture communicated strategy and survival. The forest, alive with their power, seemed to bend around them. Trees shivered, rivers surged, and the wind itself carried their presence, marking them as a force no enemy could ignore. Arrows flew, claws clashed, and the rival pack faltered under the coordinated might of the Alpha and his mate. She had never fought like this before, not just to survive, but to protect, to claim, to assert her place. Every movement revealed a skill honed in solitude, sharpened by years of hiding and surviving in the wild. The Alpha's eyes met hers across the battlefield, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. His amber gaze locked onto hers, fierce, protective, and filled with undeniable pride. They were unstoppable together, not merely alpha and mate, but partners in a battle that tested every ounce of strength, every flicker of trust between them. A rival lunged from the shadows, teeth bared, claws ready. She barely had time to react before the Alpha intercepted, taking the blow meant for her. Rage flared inside her, igniting a fire she hadn't felt before. The mark on her wrist burned bright, resonating with the power coursing through her, and with a primal yell, she launched herself into the fray. The forest itself seemed to rally behind her. Roots twisted to trip attackers, branches lashed like whips, and the river's edge surged to sweep enemies away. The Alpha's roar cut through the chaos, commanding attention, and together they forced the rival pack into retreat. Victory was hard, won, but it was theirs, carved from strength, strategy, and undeniable bond. When the last shadow disappeared into the trees, silence descended, broken only by ragged breaths and the forest's gentle sigh. She sank to her knees, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling, and the Alpha knelt beside her, hand warm against hers. "We are stronger together," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into him, to feel the full weight of the bond they shared. Their connection had been tested, forged in battle, and now it burned brighter than ever. Cliffhanger, yet even in the quiet aftermath, a new presence stirred on the horizon, a rival alpha watching, waiting. The forest's whispers warned them. Their trials were far from over. The forest was quiet, almost reverent under the fading glow of dusk. She stood on a ridge, the wind tangling her hair, chest still heaving from the morning's battle. The adrenaline had faded, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, yet more aware of the bond between her and the alpha than ever before. He approached, every step deliberate, radiating strength and authority that made her pulse quicken. His amber eyes locked onto hers, unwavering, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. Heavy, charged, unspoken. "You've proven yourself," he said, voice low but firm, carrying the weight of leadership and desire. "And not just in battle, not just in survival, but in spirit, you belong with me." Her heart stuttered, belong with him. The words should have terrified her, yet a part of her, long buried, long denied, felt relief, longing, and a dangerous hope. She wanted to deny it, to retreat into the safety of solitude, yet the pull of fate, the undeniable resonance of their bond, made that impossible. He stepped closer, the heat from his presence brushing against her skin. "The mark, the bond, it is not negotiable. You are mine as I am yours. No pack, no danger, no past can change that." She swallowed hard, pride warring with desire. Years of running, of hiding, of surviving alone, had forged walls around her heart. But the alpha's eyes, fierce and unyielding, stripped them away with a force that left her trembling. She began, but words faltered. There was fear, yes, of losing control, of surrendering to a connection she had barely begun to understand. Yet there was also trust, fragile and tentative, stretching toward him like a lifeline. He reached for her hand, thumb brushing against the glowing mark on her wrist. "I claim you," he said simply, a statement of destiny rather than desire. "And I will protect you, cherish you, and stand by you as my mate." Her chest tightened, and for the first time in years, she let herself believe that she didn't have to survive alone anymore. She belonged. To him, to the bond that fate had forged long before either of them knew it existed. Cliffhanger, but even as she leaned into his presence, savoring the warmth of his claim, the forest trembled with distant movement. Another pack watched, waiting. The challenges of love, power, and survival were far from over. The moon hung low over the forest, spilling silver light across the treetops and casting long, trembling shadows over the clearing. She stood at the edge of the ridge, talisman glowing faintly against her chest, feeling the pull of destiny that had finally found her. The alpha was beside her, his presence a solid, grounding force, yet the air between them crackled with tension, desire, and danger. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, amber eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. She swallowed hard, heart hammering. "I don't know if anyone is ready for this," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "The pack, the world, they won't understand." His hand found hers, thumb brushing along the glowing mark. "Let them not understand," he said, firm and unyielding. "This is ours, our bond, our choice. No rules, no traditions can undo what is real between us." Her pulse raced as they moved together, the forest around them silent yet alive, bearing witness to the slow, dangerous dance of their union. Every touch, every glance, every brush of skin against skin stoked a fire that had long lain dormant. For years she had hidden, survived, and avoided connection. Now the bond with the alpha burned hotter than any fear she had ever known. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling leaves as if the forest itself exhaled in approval. Yet danger lingered at the edges of other pack members, rival alphas, and the ghosts of exile that haunted her past. Every stolen touch was a rebellion, every glance a declaration that theirs was a bond stronger than any threat. "You belong with me," he murmured, voice low, possessive yet tender, "and I belong with you." She leaned into him, letting the weight of his words sink into her, feeling the pull of inevitability that had always drawn them together. For the first time, she understood that love and destiny were not always gentle. They could scorch, consume, and demand courage. Yet she no longer cared about the world's judgment. She only cared about him, and the fierce, unyielding connection that tied their fates together. The forest seemed to hum around them, alive with the power of their bond, as she let herself fall into him, surrendering to desire, trust, and the dangerous exhilaration of being truly seen. Cliffhanger, but even in this stolen moment of intimacy, shadows lurked just beyond the ridge. Rival packs watched, threats waited, and the alpha's mate, now fully awakened to her power and bond, knew the path ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand survival, heart, and an unbreakable trust. The morning sun filtered through the forest canopy, casting golden light across the clearing. She sat quietly on a fallen log, the cool breeze brushing against her skin, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. For the first time in years, the forest felt like home, not a place of hiding but a sanctuary. The alpha approached, his steps measured, silent, yet full of the kind of presence that made her pulse flutter. He knelt beside her, amber eyes warm, hands steady. "You've come a long way," he said softly, voice gentle yet resonant with pride. She let out a slow breath, memories of years spent in isolation surfacing, the nights of fear, betrayal, and loneliness, the harsh lessons learned in silence. But now, with him by her side, those wounds felt less like chains and more like proof of survival, of strength, of the journey that had led her to this moment. "I've carried so much," she admitted, voice low, almost a whisper. "So many ghosts of the past. I thought I'd always be alone with them." He placed a hand over hers, the warmth grounding her. "You're not alone anymore, and those ghosts," he said, amber eyes unwavering. "They don't control you. You've faced them, and you've grown stronger. That strength brought you to me, and me to you." Her chest tightened, emotion rising, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe in the bond between them. Not just the passion or the destiny, but the quiet, enduring love that had been forged in fire and shadow. Together, they walked deeper into the forest, letting the past fall behind with each step. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind seemed to affirm their connection. She felt her fears dissolve, replaced by trust, by hope, and by the undeniable truth that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The alpha's hand brushed hers again, a simple gesture filled with promise. "You are mine," he murmured, "and I am yours, fully, forever." Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile, the weight of exile, rejection, and betrayal finally lifting. The forest, once a place of shadows, now bore witness to healing, to acceptance, and to a love that could not be broken. Cliffhanger, yet even in this moment of peace, a distant howl echoed through the trees, a reminder that the world outside the forest still threatened, and that their union, though strong, would be tested once more. The full moon hung high over the forest, bathing the trees and clearing in luminous silver light. Every leaf, every blade of grass, shimmered as if reflecting the promise that had finally been fulfilled. She stood at the center of the clearing, talisman glinting faintly against her chest, feeling the forest pulse around her, not with threat, but with quiet witness to destiny realized. The alpha emerged from the shadows, powerful and commanding, yet softened by the warmth that radiated from his eyes. He approached with steady steps, each one echoing the bond that had carried them through danger, betrayal, and the testing of their spirits. When he reached her, he cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing along her cheeks with tenderness and certainty. "You are mine," he whispered, voice low, reverent, yet filled with irrevocable strength. "And I am yours, always." Her heart swelled at the words, a mixture of relief, desire, and awe flooding her senses. Years of hiding, of fear, of solitude, all of it had led her here, to this moment under the moonlight, standing with the mate she had long denied herself. She pressed her hands to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, matching the rhythm of her own. The forest seemed to sigh in approval, the wind carrying the whispers of ancient trees and rustling leaves. They moved together, hands entwined, steps light and unhurried, savoring the intimacy that had been forged in shadows and danger. Every glance, every brush of skin spoke of trust, of passion, of a love that had been tested and had emerged unbroken. He leaned closer, lips brushing hers in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a melding of souls rather than just flesh. Her knees weakened at the connection, at the knowledge that she had finally claimed the bond that had always been theirs to claim. "Forever," she whispered against him, voice trembling with joy. "Forever," he echoed, capturing her in an embrace that radiated protection, desire, and unshakable certainty. The forest stood still around them, witnesses to a love that had conquered exile, rejection, danger, and fear. The moon shone brighter, casting silver light upon them as they pressed closer, hearts and fates entwined. For the first time, she felt entirely safe, entirely seen, entirely loved. Resolution, in the hush of the forest under the full moon, threats faded, rival packs retreated, and destiny's promise held true. They were mate and alpha, bound not just by fate, but by choice, courage, and enduring love. Moonlight shimmered across the clearing as they embraced, and in that eternal moment the world, dangerous, wild, and uncertain, seemed to belong solely to them, cliffhanger none. This was their HEA, a triumphant, romantic, and eternal bond, sealed under the gaze of the moon, the forest, and fate itself.